The morning I collapsed, I had already been awake for 19 hours. I know that now. At the time, I didn't count. Counting would have meant admitting something was wrong, and I had spent the better part of 2 years getting very good at not admitting things. It was a Tuesday in late October. Portland was doing what Portland does in October, wrapping itself in gray, pulling rain down like a curtain, making the whole city feel like the inside of a quiet thought. I was sitting in my car in the Providence Medical Center parking garage, 3rd level, spot 14C, eating a granola bar that had been in my bag since Saturday. The heating system in my car made a clicking sound when it first turned on, a small mechanical complaint I'd been meaning to get checked for 4 months. I listened to it click. I ate the granola bar. I looked at my phone. 3 texts from my mother. 1 voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A reminder from my bank about an automatic transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and finished the granola bar. Then I got out of the car, pulled on my badge lanyard, and walked into the building where I would spend the next 12 hours keeping other people alive. My name is Selena Cooper. I'm 28 years old. I'm a registered nurse in the cardiac ICU at Providence Portland Medical Center, which means I spend my nights watching over people whose hearts have decided to become complicated. Arrhythmias, post-surgical monitoring, acute heart failure, the kind of cases that require someone to check in every 30 minutes and actually understand what the numbers mean. I am good at my job. I want to say that clearly, not as a brag, but as context, because what happened later is easier to understand if you know that I was not someone who fell apart easily. I had seen things in that ICU that most people will never see. I had held the hands of strangers at 3 a.m. I had made phone calls to families that changed their lives in 30 seconds. I had learned very early how to put the feeling in a box and close the lid and keep working. The problem was that I had been putting things in boxes for a very long time, and boxes eventually run out of room. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. The ICU on a Tuesday night shift looked like this. 6 patients, 4 nurses including me, 1 attending physician on call 2 floors up, and the particular kind of fluorescent silence that belongs only to hospitals after midnight. The unit was arranged in a horseshoe around the central nursing station. Glass-walled rooms, each one its own small universe of beeping and breathing and the soft mechanical rhythm of drip lines doing their work. My first 2 hours were routine, which in the ICU means nothing went catastrophically wrong. I checked vitals, adjusted a medication rate on Mr. Okafor in room 2, answered a question from a family member who had somehow gotten the overnight number and wanted to know if their father had eaten dinner. He had. I told her. She thanked me 3 times. I moved on. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed in my scrub pocket. I was in the middle of documenting, so I finished the sentence before I looked. Selena, honey, I hate to bother you at work, but Chris got the letter today about the scholarship. It didn't come through. I know you're busy, but if you could call me when you get a break, your father and I are trying to figure out what to do. You always know how to help us think through things. Love, Mom. I read it once. Then I read it again, because the second time, it became what it actually was. Not a request for advice. A setup. The scholarship didn't come through, which meant tuition was coming, which meant a conversation was coming, which meant a number was coming, and the number would be followed by silence, the particular silence my mother used when she was waiting for me to fill it with yes. I put the phone back in my pocket. I finished my documentation. I went to check on room 4. This was a Tuesday. By Thursday, I would know exactly how much the scholarship had been worth. By Friday, money would have moved from my account to my parents' account, as it had every month for 5 years, with a different explanation each time, but always the same direction. Away from me, toward them. I didn't think about that in the moment. I thought about room 4, Mrs. Patricia Weston, 73, post-cardiac ablation, whose oxygen saturation had dipped 2 points in the last hour and needed watching. This is the thing about being very good at taking care of other people. It becomes a place to live. It becomes so familiar and so necessary that you stop noticing you've never built anything else. To understand what happened, you need to understand my family. Not the version I used to tell. The abbreviated one, the we're close, it's complicated, every family has stuff version. But the real one, the one I had to sit with for a long time before I could look at it straight. My mother, Angelina Cooper, is 53 years old. She is beautiful in the way that takes maintenance, always put together, always appropriate, always with the right thing to say in company. She grew up in a family where money was scarce and image was everything, and she carried that combination into adulthood like luggage she didn't know she was allowed to put down. She is not a villain. I need you to understand that, because this story is easier to dismiss if she is, and I'm not interested in easy. She is a woman who learned, very young, that security comes from controlling the people around you, and she applied that lesson with the precision of someone who had practiced it her whole life. She never asked for things directly. She arranged situations in which you offered. She was masterful at it. I didn't recognize it as a pattern until I was 26 and sitting across from my friend Tara, listing out the last 3 years of financial requests, and Tara said, quietly, "Selena, that's not how families work." I told her she didn't understand our family. She let me believe that for another 2 years. Keanu Cooper, my stepfather, though he'd been in my life since I was 6 and I'd called him dad for most of those years, was a quieter presence. Not cold exactly, more like a man who had long ago decided that the path of least resistance was the only path worth taking. When my mother wanted something, Keanu waited to see if she'd get it. When she didn't, he intervened. When she did, he moved on. He was useful in emergencies and absent in the ways that mattered more. They married when I was 6. My mother had been a single parent for a year before that, which I know only from photographs and fragments. A smaller apartment, a secondhand stroller, my mother's face in pictures from that year wearing an expression I didn't see again until the last time I looked at her in a hospital room. My brother Chris was born when I was 4. He is 24 now, broad-shouldered and easy-smiled, the kind of young man who fills a room without trying. He plays soccer at a semi-competitive level, studies business at a university in Seattle on a partial scholarship that was, until recently, being supplemented by funds I helped provide. He is not mean. He is not calculating. He is simply someone who was never required to calculate, because I was always there to do it first. I started working as a registered nurse at 23, fresh out of Portland State's nursing program, with student loans and a 1-bedroom apartment, and the particular optimism of someone who has just finished something very hard and believes the hardest part is behind them. The first time I helped my parents financially, I was 23 and newly employed, and my stepfather had just lost a contract that made up a third of his income. My mother called on a Sunday. She didn't ask. She said, "We're not sure how we're going to cover the heating bill this month." And then she waited. I was 23. I said, "I can help." She said, "You're so good, Selena. I don't know what we'd do without you." I held on to that sentence for a long time. I fed myself on it in the lean months, in the tired months, in the months when my own bank account dipped lower than it should have. "You're so good. I don't know what we'd do without you." It was not nothing, but it was not enough. And it was not, I understand now, the same as being loved. The contributions became regular after that first year, not formalized. There was no conversation, no agreement, no acknowledgement that this was a pattern. It simply became the structure of things. Every few months, sometimes more frequently, there was a request packaged in worry or urgency, or, occasionally, in the soft language of connection. "I feel like we haven't talked. Are you okay? By the way, Chris needs..." Over 5 years, from the age of 23 to 28, I gave my family approximately $60,000. This is not a figure I arrived at easily. I arrived at it 6 months before the events of this story, when I sat down one February evening with my bank statements and a yellow legal pad and made myself add it up. The number surprised me, which tells you something about how I had been living. Not in denial exactly, but in motion. Always in motion. No time to look back at the shape of things. $60,000 over 5 years is $1,000 a month. On a cardiac ICU nurse's salary in Portland, that is possible. Uncomfortable, but possible. What it looked like in practice was this. I kept my apartment. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a heating system that clicked. I ate at home. I didn't take vacations. I had approximately $400 in a savings account that I thought of as my emergency fund, not knowing that my actual emergency fund, the one that had been accumulating for 22 years, existed somewhere I couldn't see. But I'll get to that. The warning signs were not dramatic. I want to be clear about this because I work in medicine, and I know that people expect warning signs to be dramatic. Chest pain, breathlessness, something cinematic. What actually happened was quieter and slower and easy to explain away, which is exactly how these things get missed. It started the previous January. Headaches after overnight shifts. Not unusual. easy to attribute to fluorescent lights and dehydration. I bought a better water bottle. I started keeping ibuprofen in my locker. By March, I was occasionally lightheaded when I stood up quickly. My blood pressure at the staff health fair was borderline. The nurse doing the screening raised an eyebrow. I told her I'd had a lot of coffee. She wrote down a number and gave me the paper. I put it in my bag and didn't look at it again. In June, something happened that I minimized at the time and have thought about many times since. I was charting at the nursing station around 2 a.m. when my heart did something strange, not painful, more like a stutter, a momentary loss of rhythm, like a record skipping. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds. I put my hand flat on the desk and breathed. Then it was over. I went back to charting. I told myself it was fatigue. I told myself a lot of things that year. Tara noticed before I did. Tara Simmons has been my closest friend since we went through orientation together 5 years ago. She is 30 years old, practical in the way that good nurses are practical, and she has a particular way of saying true things that makes them hard to argue with. One night in August, she sat down next to me at the nursing station during a quiet stretch around 3 a.m. and said without preamble, "You look like you haven't slept in a week." "I worked 4 shifts this week," I said. "You've worked 4 shifts a week for 6 months," she said. "This is different. Your hands are shaking." I looked at my hands. She was right. A fine tremor, barely visible, but there. "I'm fine," I said. "You're a cardiac nurse," she said. "You know what chronic stress does to the heart." "I'm 28. So?" I didn't have an answer to that. I changed the subject. Tara let me, because she is a good enough friend to know when to push and when to plant a seed and step back. She planted the seed. I walked around with it for 2 months while it grew into something I couldn't keep ignoring. The thing about being the responsible one in a family, the capable one, the one who figures things out, is that you apply that same standard to yourself. You do not get to be the one who needs help. You do not get to be the problem. You manage and you keep managing, and when your body starts sending signals that it is reaching the limit of what it can sustain, you file those signals under deal with later, and you keep going. I kept going through September. I kept going through the first 3 weeks of October, through a stretch of 6 consecutive night shifts, through a weekend where I slept a total of 9 hours across 2 days because my mother called both mornings and the calls were long, and the second one ended with me agreeing to cover 3 months of Chris's off-campus housing while his scholarship situation was being sorted out. I remember getting off that phone call and sitting on the edge of my bed and thinking very clearly, I cannot keep doing this. And then my alarm went off, and I had to be at work in 4 hours, and I got up and made coffee and kept doing it. The night I fell was a Thursday in the last week of October. The shift started at 7 in the evening, handoff from the day team. 6 patients, 2 of them flagged for close monitoring. One of those was Mr. Walter Briggs in room 6, 71 years old, stage 3 heart failure, admitted 4 days ago after a decompensation event. He'd been stable, but his medication had been adjusted that afternoon, and Dr. Park wanted hourly checks until morning. I read through his chart at the nursing station, made notes in my own shorthand, confirmed the new medication rates. Around me, the unit settled into its night rhythm. Brenda Walsh, our charge nurse, 19 years on this floor, the person whose competence I have measured my own against since my first day here, finished handoff and did her first walk of the unit with the quiet efficiency of someone who has done this so many times it lives in her body now. At 8:15, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I was in a patient room, so I waited. At 8:22, between rooms, I looked. A text from my mother. "Selena, just checking in. Have you thought about what we discussed? The first payment would really help us get ahead of things. No pressure, just want to plan. Love you." I read it standing in the hallway between rooms 3 and 4. The fluorescent light above me flickered. It had been flickering for a week, a maintenance request submitted and pending. I looked up at it. I looked back at the text. No pressure. I thought about all the ways I had been taught over 28 years that no pressure and love you placed at the end of a financial request were a kind of architecture, a structure designed to make the request feel personal, feel familial, feel like something you chose rather than something you were being positioned to do. I put the phone back in my pocket. I had 4 patients to check before midnight. The next several hours passed, the way difficult shifts pass. Not in segments, but in a continuous flow of small decisions and small actions, each one complete in itself. I adjusted a drip. I answered a call light. I talked a frightened patient back to something close to calm at 11 p.m. when he woke up not remembering where he was. I drank half a cup of cold coffee at the nursing station and forgot about the other half. At 1:30 in the morning, Mr. Briggs's monitor alarmed. I was in his room within 40 seconds. He was awake, agitated, his rhythm showing a run of atrial fibrillation. Not immediately life-threatening, but serious and uncomfortable and requiring attention. I called the attending, got orders, administered medication, talked Mr. Briggs through it with the steady, even voice I use in these moments. The voice that doesn't waver. The voice that sounds like nothing is wrong even when things are considerably wrong. By 2 a.m., he was stable, his rhythm back to baseline. I stood by his bed another few minutes, watching the monitor, and became aware, distantly, that my own pulse was fast. Faster than the situation warranted now that it was resolved. I noticed it the way you notice something through a window. Visible, but at a remove. I made a note to drink water. I went back to the nursing station. At 2:17 a.m., Tara, working the neighboring unit that night, our floors connected by a shared break room, came by the station with 2 cups of vending machine coffee, set one in front of me, and looked at my face. "When did you last eat?" she asked. "Dinner," I said. "What did you have?" I tried to remember. There had been something, a container of yogurt maybe, eaten standing over my kitchen sink around 5 in the afternoon before I got ready for work. "Yogurt," I said. Tara looked at me for a moment. "It's 2 in the morning. "I know what time it is." She pushed the coffee closer to me. "Drink that. I'll get you something from the break room." "I'm fine." She left anyway and came back with crackers and a banana, which she set on the desk without comment. I ate the crackers. I meant to eat the banana. I forgot about it when room 3's call light came on. At 2:47 a.m., I stood up from the nursing station to walk to the supply room at the end of the hall. A routine trip. I needed to restock the cart before the next medication round. The supply room was perhaps 40 feet away. I had walked that hallway hundreds of times. I made it about 15 feet. What happened next is something I've tried to describe accurately, because the details matter. It was not like the movies. There was no single moment of dramatic collapse. It was a sequence of small failures, each one following the next with a logic I couldn't stop. First, the edges of my vision went soft. Not dark, soft, the way a photograph looks when the focus is slightly wrong. I registered this and thought, I need to sit down, and took one more step. Then the sound of the unit. Monitors, ventilators, the distant conversation at the far nursing station dropped in volume as if someone had put a hand over my ears. The hallway tilted. Not much, just a degree or two. But a degree or two is enough when your body has been running on empty for months and your heart has been sending signals you've been filing away for later. My shoulder hit the wall. I remember the wall. Cool surface, painted cinder block, the particular solidity of a building that does not care who you are. Then Tara's voice, very sharp from somewhere behind me. "Selena!" The floor came up. After that, nothing. I woke up in room 318. I knew it was room 318 because I had been the nurse in this unit long enough to know the ceiling tiles by heart, and because there was a small water stain near the ventilation panel that I had looked at from the other side of the glass dozens of times while doing my rounds. The ceiling looked different from below. The monitor beside me beeped steadily. I turned my head and saw the readout, my own cardiac rhythm displayed on the same kind of screen I had watched 1,000 times. My heart was doing its job. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but doing it. There was no one in the chair beside my bed. I looked at the chair for a long time. It was a standard hospital visitor chair, padded vinyl, armrests, the kind that exists in every room of every hospital in the country, designed for people who are waiting. It was empty. No jacket draped over the arm, no purse on the floor beside it, no evidence that anyone had recently occupied it. I knew from the angle of the light coming through the window that it was morning. Late morning, maybe. The unit sounds outside my glass wall were the sounds of a day shift. Slightly different pace, slightly different voices. Dr. Raymond Park came in 10 minutes after I woke up. He is 44, precise and calm in the way of someone who has delivered serious news enough times to have learned how to do it without making it worse. He sat down in the empty chair, just for the conversation. I understood. Not the kind of sitting that means staying. And he looked at me directly. "You had an acute AFib episode, he said. Atrial fibrillation, precipitated by severe exhaustion, dehydration, and what looks like a few months of chronic stress on your cardiovascular system. You fell in the hallway. Tara caught your shoulder before you hit the floor hard." I absorbed this. "How long have I been here?" "Overnight. It's Friday morning." He paused. "I want to keep you for at least 10 days. Your heart needs to stabilize, and I want to understand the full picture before I clear you for work. 10 days. I thought about my patients. I thought about the rescheduling. I thought about Mr. Briggs and whether the night nurse had seen his 4 a.m. labs. My patients are being covered, Dr. Park said. That's not your job right now. I looked at the empty chair again. Did anyone... I stopped. Dr. Park looked at the chair, then back at me. His expression didn't change, but something in it shifted slightly. The small adjustment of a person choosing their words. We contacted your family, he said carefully. Your emergency contact. They came this morning. This morning, I repeated. How long ago? A pause. They left about an hour ago. I looked at the window. At the gray Portland sky, clouds low and featureless, the kind of sky that doesn't promise anything. They're coming back? I asked. Dr. Park was quiet for just a moment too long. They mentioned they had travel plans, he said. Your mother said she'd call. Travel plans. I had been unconscious on a hospital floor 12 hours ago. I was lying in an ICU bed with a cardiac monitor attached to my chest. And my family had travel plans. I didn't say anything. I turned my face back toward the window and watched the clouds for a long time, and Dr. Park, to his credit, sat with me in the silence instead of filling it with things that wouldn't help. After a while, he stood up. Brenda's on tonight. She'll check on you, and Tara's coming by after her shift. Okay, I said. He paused at the door. Selena, your body has been trying to tell you something for a while. It's finished waiting for you to listen. He left. The monitor beeped. The room was very quiet. I looked at the empty chair. Brenda Walsh came in at 7:15 that evening, just after the shift change, to check my vitals and adjust my IV line. She is in her mid-50s. Broad-shouldered, economical with words, the kind of nurse whose competence is so complete it reads as calm. She has 4 children, a husband who coaches high school basketball, and a way of being present in a room that makes you feel like the room is being held together. She took my blood pressure, noted it on her tablet, and then said, without looking up, Your friend Tara left you a bag, clothes, your phone charger, some things from your apartment. She has a spare key, I said. Good friend. Yes. Brenda finished with the IV and straightened. She was about to leave when I said, Brenda, when my family came this morning, how long were they here? She looked at me. Brenda has the face of someone who does not lie but has learned to be careful with the truth. About 20 minutes, she said. 20 minutes. I'd been unconscious. I'd been in this bed. 20 minutes. Did they... I stopped, reorganized. Did my mother ask about my chart, my diagnosis? She asked when you'd be able to go home. I nodded slowly. And my father? He asked if you had good coverage. A pause. Insurance coverage. And my brother? Brenda's expression softened by a fraction. He asked if you were stable. He seemed... She considered. He seemed like he didn't know what else to ask. I thought about Chris, 24 years old, standing in this room with his easy smile and his genuine bewilderment, not knowing what to do with a sister in a hospital bed, reverting to the only question that seemed practical. He wasn't cruel. He just didn't know. He'd never been taught to know because I'd always made it unnecessary. Where did they go? I asked. Brenda hesitated. Just a second. Maui. Your brother has a tournament. Maui. I let the words sit in the room. It was not a surprise exactly. The tournament had been planned for weeks. I knew that. But knowing something is possible and having it confirmed are different things. Like knowing a storm is coming and then watching it arrive. Of course, I said quietly. Brenda adjusted my blanket. A small gesture, precise and kind. I'll be back at 10 to check your rhythm, she said. Thank you, I said. She left. The unit hummed beyond the glass. My phone, retrieved from Tara's bag, showed 4 texts. One from my mother, call me when you're up, hope you're resting. One from Keanu, glad you're okay, take it easy. One from Chris, hey, heard you're awake, feel better. And one from Tara, I'm coming by at 8, I'm bringing the good crackers, not the hospital ones, don't argue. I lay there in the quiet of room 318 and listened to my own heart on the monitor, steady, finally, after all this time, and I thought about 20 minutes. I thought about what it means to be someone's emergency and someone's inconvenience at the same time. I was still thinking about it when, sometime past midnight, I looked up at the sound of a footstep in the hallway and saw, through the glass wall of my room, a shape I didn't recognize. A man. Standing still, not moving toward my room, not moving away, just standing in the low light of the overnight corridor looking through the glass. I watched him. He didn't come in. He didn't wave. He just stood there with a stillness that didn't feel threatening. More like the stillness of someone who is deciding something, or someone who has already decided and is waiting to see if it was right. After several minutes, he moved away down the corridor and was gone. I lay back against my pillow and stared at the ceiling. My heart kept its rhythm on the monitor, steady and evidence-based, doing the one job it had never stopped doing. I didn't know, that night, who he was. I didn't know what the next 10 days would cost or what they would return to me. I didn't know about the visitor log or the trust account or the letter that would arrive 6 weeks later in my mailbox with no return address. I only knew that a stranger had stood outside my door in the dark and looked in, and something about it, the stillness of him, the patience of it, felt like the opposite of 20 minutes and a flight to Maui. I closed my eyes. Outside, Portland kept raining. On the third day, I learned his name. Not directly, not the way you learn things when someone decides you deserve to know them. I learned it the way you learn most important things in a hospital. Sideways, in pieces, from someone who was being careful with how much they gave me at once. Tara had come by that afternoon after her shift, still in her scrubs with her hair coming loose from its braid. She sat in the visitor chair, the one that had been empty that first morning, with the ease of someone who understood that occupying that chair was an act of love. She'd brought crackers, as promised, and a cup of soup from the cafeteria that was only mediocre but was hot, which in a hospital at 4 p.m. counts for a great deal. We talked about work the way people do when they're trying to be normal, carefully, with distance, the way you talk about a house you used to live in. She told me Mr. Briggs had been discharged that morning, stable, with a referral to outpatient cardiology. I felt a small unclenching in my chest when she said that. Some patients stay with you like that, take up a quiet residence. She was pulling on her jacket to leave when she paused at the door. "Hey," she said, with the tone she uses when she's been deciding whether to say something. Last night, around 2 a.m, Brenda mentioned someone was asking about you at the nursing station, not a family member. She said he asked which room you were in and then just stood outside for a while, didn't go in. I looked at her. What did he look like? I didn't see him. Brenda did. She picked up her bag. Probably nothing, just thought you'd want to know. After she left, I lay there thinking about the shape in the hallway, the stillness of him, the particular quality of someone who is present without demanding anything from the fact of their presence. I thought about my family in Maui and the empty chair on the first morning and 20 minutes. Then I pushed the call button and asked if Brenda was on tonight. She was. Brenda came in at 9 p.m. with her tablet in her efficient hands and the expression of someone who has been expecting a particular conversation. "The man who was here last night," I said before she could start on my vitals, "the one who stood outside." She looked at me steadily. "You saw him?" "Through the glass. Who is he?" Brenda set her tablet on the bedside table and took my wrist. Pulse check, professional habit, buying herself a moment. Then she said, "His name is Daniel Holt. He came to the nursing station the night you were admitted, asked for room 318. I told him visiting hours were over. He said he understood. Then he stood in the hall for about an hour and left." "Daniel Holt," I said. The name did not open any door I could identify. It didn't connect to a face or a memory or a specific moment, but it did something else. It landed in a place slightly below conscious thought, the way certain sounds do, and something there recognized it. Or recognized the shape of it, the outline. "Did he say how he knows me?" "He said he knew you." Brenda looked at me carefully. "He came back the second night too, and last night. He doesn't come in. He stands for a while and then he goes." I was quiet for a moment. Outside my room, the unit moved in its overnight rhythm, the sounds I had spent 5 years learning to read. "The hospital bill," I said slowly. "Brenda, I haven't looked at my account yet, but I'm not able to discuss another patient's financial transactions," Brenda said, in the tone of someone reciting a policy they intend to follow precisely and no further. Then she picked up her tablet and made a note and said, without looking at me, "What I can tell you is that when I checked your account status this afternoon to confirm your insurance information, everything showed as settled." She looked up, met my eyes. "Settled," I said. "Fully." I stared at her. I need to think, I said. That's reasonable, she said. She finished her checks, noted my rhythm, and moved to the door. He'll likely be here again tonight, around 1:30. If you want me to tell him you'd prefer he not come, I'll do that. No, I said, too quickly. Then, more measured, no, don't tell him that. Brenda nodded once, the way she nods when she's registered something she considers significant. Then she left me alone with a name I'd never heard, and a bill I hadn't paid, and the quiet, specific feeling of something I couldn't yet name pressing against the inside of my chest. I was awake when he came, 1:23 in the morning. I had not slept. I had lain in the dark and listened to my monitor and thought about 5 years of transfers and a father who asked about insurance and a mother who sent texts from Maui with love in the sign-off. I had thought about Tara's face when she said, "That's not how families work." I had thought about the first time I helped with money, 23 years old on a Sunday phone call, and how I had felt useful and chosen and, underneath both of those, relieved. Because if I was useful, I was necessary, and if I was necessary, I was safe. I had thought about a lot of things. That's what 12 days in a hospital bed gives you. Time with yourself, whether you want it or not. The shape appeared at the end of the hallway at 1:19. I had positioned my bed so I could see the corridor, and I watched him walk. Not fast, not slow, the deliberate pace of someone who has made this trip before and learned the right speed for it. He stopped outside my room. Through the glass, I could see more of him than I had the first night. Tall, somewhere in his mid-50s. Broad-shouldered in the way that suggests someone who was once physically active and still carries the posture of it. His hair was dark with gray through it, more gray than dark. He wore a heavy jacket, the kind for real Oregon weather, and he had his hands in his pockets. He looked at the glass. At me. I raised my hand, not a wave, exactly, more of an acknowledgement. I see you. I know you're there. He was still for a moment. Then he nodded, once, with the gravity of someone accepting a small and significant thing. He moved to the chair outside my room, the one in the hallway, the one that was there for families waiting during procedures. And he sat down, and he stayed. I watched him through the glass for a while. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't read. He just sat in the way that some people can sit, completely, without apparent need for anything else. After a time, I turned my face back toward the ceiling. The monitor beeped. The unit hummed. I fell asleep, I think, around 3 a.m. When I woke at 5 with the shift change sounds, I looked out through the glass. The hallway chair was empty. He was gone. But he had been there. That was the fact of it. He had sat in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning because I didn't know why yet. But he had been there while my family was in Maui, and I had slept better those few hours than I had slept in months, and I did not know what to do with that. On the 7th day, I could sit up without the room tilting. I could drink a full cup of water. I could make it to the bathroom and back without anyone hovering at my elbow. Dr. Park called it progress. I called it the bare minimum, and then corrected myself because I had spent too long measuring my own condition by the standard of, can I still function? And it was exactly that standard that had put me here. Brenda came in that afternoon to change my IV, and I asked her before she could leave, "Does Mr. Holt know I'm awake? That I've been awake?" "He asked each night," she said. "I told him you were improving." "Tell him," I stopped, thought, "tell him if he wants to come in, he can." Brenda looked at me with the expression she uses when she is not going to say the thing she is thinking. "I'll let him know," she said. He came at 4 o'clock that afternoon. He stood in the doorway for a moment before entering, the same way he had stood in the hallway, reading the room, giving it the chance to change its mind. He was more real up close than he had been through glass. The gray in his hair was more pronounced in daylight. His eyes were a color between blue and gray, the color of the sky over Portland in November, and they were the eyes of someone who had learned to be careful about the weight they put on people. He stayed near the door. "Selena," he said. Just my name, quietly, as though it was something he had been holding for a long time. "Mr. Holt," I said. He didn't correct it. "How are you feeling?" "Better than a week ago." I looked at him steadily. I was a cardiac ICU nurse. I had sat with hundreds of strangers at moments of extreme vulnerability, and I knew how to read a room and a person and the space between what was being said and what needed to be. "Sit down, please." "You're making the doorway look crowded." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, but the loosening that happens before one. He sat in the visitor chair. Not perching on the edge the way people sit when they're not sure they're allowed to stay, sitting fully, as though he'd decided this was the right thing to do and was going to do it properly. "Who are you?" I asked. And I'd prefer the direct answer, not the version people give when they're trying to protect me from something. He looked at his hands for a moment, then he looked at me. "I'm someone who should have been here a long time ago." "That's the other version," I said. He was quiet. Outside the window, the rain had started again, the soft, persistent kind. "You're right," he said. "You deserve the direct one. He stopped. "I need you to know I'm aware I don't have the right to walk in here and change everything in an afternoon. Whatever I tell you, whatever you decide to do with it, that's yours. I'm not here to take anything. I just couldn't." He paused again. "I couldn't let you be alone." I looked at him for a long time, at his hands, which were still, at his face, which was not performing anything. "Okay," I said. "Let's start smaller. What do you do?" "Architect. Retired, mostly." "Mostly." "I consult occasionally. I live in Portland now. I moved here about 8 months ago." "From where?" "Seattle." I held that. "And before that?" "Spokane. Before that, Boise." He glanced at me. "I moved around for work for a long time." "Do you have family here?" He was quiet for just a beat. "That's what I'm hoping to figure out." I let that sentence sit in the room without touching it. The rain ran down the window. My monitor kept its steady record. "You paid my hospital bill," I said. "Yes." "Why?" He looked at me directly. "Because it needed paying, and because I could, and because—" He stopped, started again. "Because there are things I owe that can't be paid with money. But I started there anyway." I thought about that. About all the things I had paid for over 5 years and what I'd been told they meant, and how different this felt from those transactions. Different in a way I didn't have language for yet, but could feel the shape of, the way you can feel the shape of something in the dark before you can see it. "I want to know more," I said. "Not all of it today, but I want to know." He nodded. "Whenever you're ready." "Come back tomorrow," I said. He stood. "Okay." "And Mr. Holt," he paused at the door. "Come in the front way next time. You don't have to stand in the hallway." He looked at me for a moment with those storm-colored eyes. I wasn't sure I was allowed. "Now you know," I said. He nodded once, the private gravity of it, and left. I lay back against my pillow and looked at the ceiling and thought aloud, about all the things in my life I had done without being asked, and how strange it was to be sitting across from someone who had waited to be given permission. The days that followed had a shape I hadn't expected. Not dramatic, not revelatory, not yet, just present. A different quality of time than I had known in years. Daniel came each afternoon. He brought coffee on the second visit, Portland roasting, the dark blend I kept in my cabinet at home, which meant he had asked Brenda and Brenda had told him, which meant Brenda had made a decision about the situation and it was apparently in his favor. I noted this without comment. Brenda's judgment had never failed me in 5 years. He was not a man who filled silence uncomfortably. This was, I discovered, one of the rarest things about him. He could sit in a room and simply be in it without needing the air to hold his voice. The first afternoon he came in and I was still tired from a poor night's sleep, and we sat mostly in quiet while the rain came down, and it was the most rested I had felt in a conversation in as long as I could remember. On the second visit, I asked him about architecture. He talked about it with the ease of someone who has thought carefully about why they love a thing, the way a building can honor or disrespect the land it sits on, the way space changes how people feel without them knowing why. He asked about nursing. I told him about the ICU, the specific intimacy of it, the way you come to know a patient's body as a set of rhythms and responses before you know anything else about them. He listened in the way that meant something was being received, not just heard. On the third visit, day 9 of my hospitalization, I told him about the transfers. Not all of it, not yet. Just the shape. 5 years, consistent amounts, consistent direction. The way it had felt both voluntary and inevitable, like a river that you're already in when you realize the current is stronger than you thought. He didn't say anything right away. He held his coffee cup and looked at the window and was quiet in a way that was not dismissive or uncomfortable, but simply allowing the weight of what I'd said to be what it was. Then he said, "Did you ever say no?" "Once," I said. 3 years ago, my mother didn't speak to me for 11 days. He nodded slowly. "What happened after the 11 days?" "She called like it hadn't happened, and I didn't bring it up. Because?" I thought about it honestly, because the alternative was losing her, and I didn't know yet that what I was holding on to wasn't really what I thought it was. He nodded again, not judging, not agreeing in the easy way people agree when they want you to feel better, just receiving it. That evening, before he left, he set a plain white envelope on my bedside table. "You don't have to open it," he said. "If you do and you have questions, I'll answer them, all of them." I looked at the envelope. What's in it? The beginning of a longer conversation. He left. I looked at the envelope for 20 minutes. I counted because it seemed important to know how long I considered it. 20 minutes. The same amount of time my family had sat in this room before flying to Maui. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a set of documents. Not a letter, no handwritten note, no explanation up front, just paper. Financial paper, the kind with institutional headers and account numbers. I am a nurse. I understand documentation. I know how to read a record and extract the meaning without losing the detail. I read the first page, understood what it was, and went back to the top and read it again more slowly. It was a trust account, a financial trust established in the name of Selena Marie Cooper, beneficiary. The account had been opened and funded by Daniel Holt. The date of the first deposit was in March, the year I turned 6. I checked the date, checked it again. 22 years of deposits. Annual, consistent, not large individually, but accumulated over 2 decades into a number I read 3 times before it settled. I turned to the last page. A memo, printed, dated 4 months ago. Attempted beneficiary notification. No response. Previous notification attempts. 7, spanning 12 years. Documentation of each attempt attached. Account remains active and accessible pending verified contact with beneficiary. 7 attempts, 12 years. No response. I sat with that. Then I turned back to the first page and looked at the date again. March, the year I was 6. The year my mother married Keanu Cooper and we moved from Seattle to Portland, and I started a new school and was told, in the way children are told things without being told them directly, that the past was the past and we were starting fresh. My hands were not shaking. I noticed that. They had been shaking for months before I collapsed, the fine, persistent tremor of a body running on fumes. They were still now. I put the documents back in the envelope. I set the envelope on the bedside table. I looked at the window, at the dark Portland night and the wet shine of the parking lot lights far below. My mother had moved us from Seattle to Portland when I was 6. Daniel Holt had moved from Seattle to Portland 8 months ago. He had tried to reach me 7 times in 12 years. I picked up my phone and called Tara. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said. "I need you to come here. I need to show you something." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, without asking anything else. That was Tara. That had always been Tara. She came in 19 minutes, still in street clothes, hair down. She sat in the visitor chair, and I handed her the envelope without preamble. She read the way I had, carefully from the beginning, going back when she needed to. When she finished, she looked up at me. "Selena." "I know." "This is," she looked at the documents again, "this is a trust account in your name for 22 years. "I can see that." "And your mother," "I don't know yet what my mother," I said. "I know what I see. I know what it says about 7 attempts at notification with no response. I know he moved here 8 months ago, and he found me, and I ended up in a hospital bed before he could figure out how to..." I stopped. "Before he could figure out if I knew, if I'd want to know." Tara set the documents on her knee. "He might be..." "My father," I said. "I think he's my father, Tara." The word sat between us in the room. Father. I had not said that word about a man I meant it about in 22 years. "Okay," Tara said. She didn't rush the word or inflate it. Just, "Okay, I'm here. Go on." "I need to ask him," I said. "Tomorrow, I need to ask him directly, and I need to hear what he says." Do you want me here when you do? I thought about it. No, but stay close. She nodded. She reached over and took my hand, not dramatically, just her hand over mine, warm and present. Outside, Portland kept raining. He came the next afternoon at 4. He sat down and looked at me, and I think he saw from my face that something had shifted. He didn't fill the air with anything. He just waited. I had the envelope on the bedside table. I didn't pick it up. I said, I need you to tell me who you are to me, not the careful version, the true one. He looked at the envelope, then at me. Something in his face released. Not relief exactly, more like the expression of someone who has been carrying a held breath for a very long time. Your mother and I were married, he said. A long time ago in Seattle. We were young. We had you. I was quiet. When you were 5, we separated. There wasn't cruelty in it. We had grown into people who couldn't stay together. The divorce was civil. The custody arrangement gave your mother primary custody with regular visitation for me. He paused. I thought we were going to do it right. Co-parent. I had an apartment 20 minutes from yours. I was at your 6th birthday. I don't remember. You had a cake with strawberries. You dropped your fork and thought it was the funniest thing that had happened in your entire life. He said it simply, without reaching for the emotion of it. 3 weeks after your birthday, your mother told me she was relocating. Portland. New start. She'd met Keanu or was close to meeting him. I never got the full sequence. She had the right to move under the original agreement because the distance threshold hadn't been written in clearly enough. I didn't have the money to contest it quickly enough. By the time I found the right lawyer, she had already enrolled you in a new school, and the court said disrupting your routine would not serve your best interest. He looked at the window. I sent letters. They came back or went unanswered. I set up the trust because I needed to do something. I needed there to be something that was mine going to you, even if I couldn't. I tried through intermediaries twice. I hired someone to locate you when you turned 18, then again at 21. But your mother, the contact attempts went through channels she controlled, and I believe now they never reached you. He was quiet for a moment. 2 years ago, I hired someone different. Better. He found you working at Providence. I moved here. You watched me from a distance, I said. Not accusatory, just confirming. I didn't know what you knew. I didn't know what you'd been told about me. I didn't know if you wanted... He stopped. I was afraid if I walked up to you in a parking lot and said I was your father, it might be the worst thing I could do to you, so I waited. I was trying to figure out the right way. And then I collapsed. And then you collapsed, he said. And I stopped trying to figure out the right way and just came. The monitor beeped. The rain moved against the window. My mother knew about the trust account, I said. It was not a question. He was quiet for a moment. I believe so. Yes. The trust was filed in the county where you were born. It's public record if you know to look for it, and the notifications 7 times. Some of those went to addresses where she was the contact. She let me pay for the family, I said. For 5 years. She knew there was money. She knew there was money that was mine, and she let me... I stopped. The room was very still. I didn't know about that, Daniel said quietly. I didn't know you were doing that until Brenda told me some of what was happening. I'm sorry. If I had known... You couldn't have fixed it from outside a glass door, I said. No, he said, but I would have tried. I looked at him, at the steadiness of him, at a man who had sat in a hallway for 12 nights because he didn't know if he was allowed to do anything more but couldn't bring himself to do anything less. I'm angry, I said. I want you to know that. Not at you, not mainly, but at all of it, the years of it, the shape of it. That's right, he said. That's the right thing to feel. I don't know what to do with you yet, I said. I don't know what this is or what it becomes. I need time. I know, he said. I'm not going anywhere. You've been saying that with your feet for 12 nights, I said. I noticed. Something moved across his face then. And this time it did reach his eyes, a warmth that didn't perform itself, that simply was. Yeah, he said. I have. The call from my mother came the next morning. Day 11. I had been expecting it. She would be back from Maui, she would have plans, she would have managed her concern from a distance, and was now ready to manage the conclusion of the situation in person. I answered on the 4th ring. Selena, honey, I'm back. How are you feeling? Are you ready to come home? I can come get you tomorrow. We can set you up in your old room for a few days while you recover. Mom, I said. because I was thinking you shouldn't be alone right after, and it would give us a chance to... Mom, she paused. Do you know a man named Daniel Holt? The pause this time was different. 3 seconds. The length of a person reorganizing. Where did you hear that name? She said. Her voice had changed, still controlled, but a different kind of controlled. The kind that's working harder. He's been visiting me, I said, while you were in Maui. Selena, you need to be very careful. Is he my father? Silence. Mom. He's someone from a very long time ago who has a very distorted version of events, she said. Her voice had gone careful and precise, the way it goes when she is building something. He's not a good person. He left us, Selena. He chose to disappear, and now that you're... Did you know about the trust account? I said. Silence. Longer this time. That's complicated, she said. Did you know about it? There are things about that situation that you don't fully... Mom. My voice was the voice I use in the ICU. Calm, even, non-negotiable. I'm going to need you to answer the question directly. The silence stretched out long enough that I could hear, very faintly, sounds on her end. A door, a television. I was protecting you, she said finally. I looked at the window, at the gray Portland sky, the same sky it had been for 11 days. I'm going to need some time, I said. Before we talk more, I need to think. Selena, don't make a decision based on... I'm not making a decision. I'm taking time. I'll call you. When? When I'm ready. I ended the call, set the phone on the bedside table, looked at my hands, still, not shaking. The morning of day 13, Angelina arrived at the hospital without calling first. I knew before Brenda came in to tell me. There was a particular quality to the atmosphere, the way the unit tightened slightly, the way Brenda's expression when she appeared in my doorway was professional in an exerted way. Your mother is at the front desk, she said. She's requesting discharge papers. She can't request my discharge papers, I said. She's not my emergency contact. Brenda nodded with the expression of someone confirming a fact they had already confirmed. She found that out downstairs. She's also been given the visitor log. How is she? She is, Brenda said carefully, managing her reaction. Daniel was in the visitor chair. He had been here since 3 p.m. He looked at Brenda. She's coming up. Yes, Brenda said. He didn't move. He looked at me. Do you want me to leave? No, I said. The door opened 3 minutes later. My mother is a beautiful woman. I have always known this, and it has always been complicated. She came through the door in a blazer the color of autumn leaves, her skin carrying the warmth of 10 days in Hawaiian sun, her hair perfect. She looked like someone arriving at something she intended to resolve efficiently. She saw Daniel. She stopped. For a moment, just a moment, the performance stopped too. What was underneath it was something that looked like fear, and something that looked like a very old anger, and something else I couldn't name that lived underneath both of those. Then it reassembled. Selena. She came to my bedside, leaned in, kissed my cheek. Her perfume was the same as it had always been. You look better. Are you eating? You look pale. I'm fine, I said. She straightened and turned her body slightly, not fully toward Daniel, not fully away. The calculation of it was visible to me in a way it might not have been a month ago. You need to leave, she said to him. Quiet, controlled. He was invited, I said. She looked at me. Selena, you don't know this man's history. I know more than I did 2 weeks ago, I said. Sit down, Mom. I'm not going to. Please sit down. She sat. She put her bag on the floor and folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with the expression of someone prepared to be patient with a misunderstanding. The trust account, I said. I need to understand what you knew and when. I already told you that's complicated. I've read the documentation, I said. 7 notification attempts over 12 years. Some of them went to your address. Her jaw tightened slightly. Those letters were what? A pause. I made decisions that I thought were best for you. You were a child. I was protecting you from someone who had chosen to walk away. He didn't choose to walk away, I said. He tried to maintain contact and lost access when you relocated without adequate notice under the custody agreement. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. He told you that. He told me. I also read the documents. Documents can be... Mom... I kept my voice level. I'm not asking you to be wrong. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. Did you know the account existed? She looked at her hands. A long moment. Yes, she said. The word cost her something. I could see it. Did you know what it was worth? Approximately. Did you prevent the notifications from reaching me? Silence. Mom, I didn't think it was in your best interest to have contact with... That's not the question I asked, I said. She looked up at me then, and what was on her face was complicated. Not simple guilt, something more tangled. A woman who had made a series of choices that had seemed, at each individual decision point, like the protective thing to do, and who was only now sitting across from the accumulated result of all of them. Yes, she said, I intercepted 2 of them. The others I don't know for certain. The room was very quiet. Keanu arrived in the doorway then. He must have parked separately, or waited. I don't know. He looked at the room, at Daniel, and his face went through several things quickly before it settled on a careful neutrality. Selena, he said, how are you feeling? Honestly, I said, clearer than I have in a long time. He came in slowly, stood near my mother's chair. He didn't look at Daniel again. He looked at me. You need to rest. You don't need to do this now. I'm not doing anything except having a conversation that should have happened years ago, I said. Your mother was trying... Keanu. I looked at him directly. I'm 38 days from 30. I have been supporting this family financially for 5 years. I collapsed in a hospital hallway. I am the patient in this room. I paused. Please don't explain my mother's intentions to me. He was quiet. Chris appeared in the doorway behind him. He must have come directly from the airport. He still had his carry-on. He looked at the room, at me in the bed, at our parents standing, at Daniel in the visitor chair. His face, unlike our parents, showed everything without trying to hide it. He looked uncertain and young and like someone seeing something clearly for the first time. Chris, I said. Hey, he said, soft, careful. Hi. He came in slowly and stood at the foot of my bed. He didn't know where to put himself. He looked at Daniel and then away. My mother had recovered her composure. She turned to Daniel with the manner of someone who has decided that engagement is the only remaining strategy. You can't walk back in here after 22 years and pretend to be her family, she said. I'm not pretending anything, Daniel said. His voice was even. I'm her father. You lost that? He didn't lose it, I said. It was taken. My mother looked at me, and what crossed her face then, beneath the composure, beneath the management of it, was something I recognized because I had felt it myself in the last 2 weeks. The sensation of a structure you've built over a long time beginning to show its true load-bearing capacity. I was protecting you, she said. And underneath the strategy, underneath the control, I heard something that was, in its broken way, true. She believed it. She had always believed it. That was, in some ways, the saddest part. I know you think that, I said, and I need time to figure out what to do with that. But right now, I need you to hear something. I looked at her steadily. I have spent 5 years giving this family money I didn't have, missing sleep I couldn't spare, running on empty in a job that requires everything I have. And the whole time, there was a trust account in my name that you knew about and kept from me. I'm not going to keep arguing about whether you meant well. I'm telling you what the result was. I'm the result. She opened her mouth. I'm not finished, I said gently. The transfers are stopped. The joint account is closed. I changed my emergency contact weeks ago. You found that out downstairs. Those things aren't changing. I paused. I'm not telling you I'm done with you. I'm telling you I'm done with the version of us that only worked because I kept agreeing to pay for it. The room was quiet. My mother stood up. She picked up her bag. Her eyes were bright, whether with tears or with anger, I could not fully tell. Perhaps both, perhaps neither, perhaps something that didn't have a clean name. You'll regret this, she said. Maybe, I said, but I already regret the last 5 years, so I'm working with what I have. She looked at Daniel one more time. Something passed between them. The long, complicated look of 2 people who share a history neither of them has finished processing. Then she walked out. Keanu followed, pausing at the door just long enough to look at me with an expression I couldn't read and chose not to try. Chris stayed. He stood at the foot of my bed after our parents had gone, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. When he looked up, his eyes were red at the edges. I didn't know about the account, he said. I want you to know that. I didn't know she... He stopped. I knew you sent money. I thought, he stopped again. You thought that's how it worked, I said, not unkindly. Yeah, he exhaled. I didn't think about what it cost you. I didn't ask. I looked at my brother, 24 years old, carrying a carry-on and a reckoning, standing in a hospital room trying to figure out how to be a different version of himself. I know, I said. I'm sorry, Selena. I know that too. He stood there for another moment. Then, is there anything I can do? I thought about it honestly. Not right now, but the fact that you're asking is something. He nodded. He looked at Daniel. One long look, complicated and searching. Daniel met it quietly. Then Chris looked back at me, touched the foot of my bed once, briefly, and left. The door settled closed. The room was very still. Brenda appeared in the doorway as if she had been waiting at a precise remove for exactly this. Tea? She said. 2 cups, I said. She nodded and disappeared. Daniel sat in the visitor chair and looked out at the rain. I lay back against my pillow and let the quiet come in, the real kind, the kind that isn't absence but presence. You okay? Daniel asked, without looking away from the window. I thought about the honest answer. I'm going to be, I said. Outside, Portland kept raining, the monitor beeped, and in room 318, for the first time in longer than I could account for, the chair beside my bed was not empty. They tell you recovery is linear. They say it like a promise, that you will move steadily and in one direction from broken toward whole, that each day will be measurably better than the last, that there is a shape to it, a clear trajectory you can point to and say, here is where I was and here is where I am going. That is not how it went for me. What actually happened was more like weather. Some mornings I woke up in my apartment and felt something close to lightness, a sense of space in my chest that I hadn't known was missing until it began tentatively to return. Other mornings I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of everything settle back in, not as fresh pain, but as a deep familiar ache, the kind that lives in old injuries when the temperature drops. Both of those things were true at the same time. That's what nobody tells you about the other side of something hard. It is not a destination. It is a practice. I was discharged on day 14. Not my mother's timeline. Mine. Dr. Park signed the paperwork on a Friday afternoon in early November, when the Portland rain had softened into mist and the trees in the hospital courtyard had finished losing their leaves and stood clean and bare against a white sky. He gave me a follow-up schedule, a list of restrictions, and a referral to Dr. Nadia Coleman, a therapist who specialized in what he called, with characteristic understatement, adjustment following significant life events. I took the referral. That was new. The old version of me would have folded it into her bag and lost it, because seeking help for myself was something I had never fully learned how to do without guilt. Tara drove me home. She carried my bag up the 3 flights to my apartment and stood in my kitchen and made tea without being asked, moving around in the comfortable way of someone who has been in a space enough times to know where things are. I sat on the couch in my coat, not ready to fully arrive yet, and watched the mist on the window. You need groceries, she said from the kitchen. I know. I'll order something. Don't argue. I'm not arguing. She appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her mug, and looked at me with the expression she uses when she is doing an assessment. How are you actually feeling? Like I've been in a hospital for 2 weeks. And the other thing? I thought about it. Like I took a house apart and now I'm standing in the lot where it used to be, trying to figure out what to build. She nodded. That sounds about right. She came and sat on the other end of the couch. Give yourself time, Selena. You don't have to know what to build today. I know, I said. Outside, the mist kept going. I drank my tea. For the first time in as long as I could remember, there was nothing I needed to do in the next hour. No transfer to authorize, no call to return, no request to manage. The silence was enormous and unfamiliar, and underneath both of those things, something I was beginning to recognize as mine. The first week home had a structure I built deliberately, because I had learned, finally, that structure was not the same as overwork. Structure was what made space. Without it, the days collapsed into each other, and I filled the gaps with whatever felt most urgent, and urgent had been the wrong compass for too long. Mornings, wake at 7, not 6, not 5:30. Coffee at my own table, sitting down, not standing over the sink. 30 minutes with the window and the city and whatever was happening outside. Often rain, some days a pale thin sun, Once a crow that sat on the fire escape railing for 20 minutes and looked at me with the profound indifference of a creature that has never doubted its own right to occupy space. I thought about that crow more than once in the weeks that followed. Afternoons, a walk if the weather allowed. My neighborhood in Northeast Portland was the kind of neighborhood that had changed slowly over 2 decades. Old craftsman houses, corner coffee shops, a library branch 3 blocks away where I started going on Tuesdays because I had forgotten, somewhere in the years of working and sending and managing, that I liked to read. Thursdays. Dr. Coleman. Her office was on the 2nd floor of a building near Ladd's Addition, small and warm with a window that looked out onto a garden that was dormant now, but had the organized structure of something that would be remarkable in spring. She was in her mid-50s, unhurried, with the particular skill of asking exactly one question and then giving you the full weight of her attention while you answered it. In our 2nd session, she asked, "When did you first learn that being needed and being loved were the same thing?" I sat with that for a long time. "I don't remember a time when I didn't believe that," I said finally. "That's usually how it works," she said. "It gets in early." "How do you get it out?" "By learning, repeatedly, through experience, that they're different, by noticing when someone is present without needing something from you, by letting that be evidence." I thought about a chair outside a glass door, a cup of coffee, dark roast that I hadn't asked for, a man who had waited to be invited and then, when invited, had simply been there. "I'm working on it," I said. Daniel and I met on Wednesdays. This was an arrangement that had emerged naturally without being formalized. After the hospital, we had both simply continued showing up in a different place now, with more ordinary furniture around us. A coffee shop the first few weeks, a small place near my apartment called Anchor, where the tables were worn wood and the barista knew my order by the 3rd visit. Then sometimes a walk when the weather was manageable. Once, on a rare clear afternoon in mid-November, through the Japanese garden in Washington Park, where the bare trees made beautiful shapes against the sky and there were almost no other visitors. We were learning each other the way adults learn each other when they've missed the ordinary years. Deliberately, with more conversation than a normal relationship requires. Filling in the gaps that would have been filled by simply growing up together. He told me about his work, the projects he was proudest of, and the ones he wished he'd done differently. He told me about the years he'd spent moving, Boise, then Spokane, then back to Seattle, the restlessness of someone who hasn't found the right reason to stay anywhere. He told me about the failed relationship in his 40s, a woman named Janet who had been kind and good and deserved more presence than he'd been able to give her during the years when his energy was consumed by trying to find me. "Do you regret that?" I asked. "I regret that I couldn't be more for her at the time," he said, "but I don't regret the search." I told him things too, slowly, in pieces, the way you move through a house you haven't been in for a long time. I told him about nursing school and why I'd chosen cardiac. I told him about Tara and what her friendship had meant. I told him about the February night with the bank statements and the yellow legal pad sitting at my kitchen table adding up 5 years, and the particular sounds of a person confronting something they had been managing not to see. One Wednesday in late November, I told him something I hadn't told anyone else. "The worst part isn't the money," I said. We were walking along the waterfront, the river slate-colored and wide, the downtown skyline behind us. "The worst part is that I was good at believing it was love. I was genuinely good at it. I could feel it like it was love. The praise, the need, the being the one they called, it hit the same place. I don't know how long it would have taken me to see it if my body hadn't made it impossible to keep going." He walked beside me quietly for a moment, then, "Does it make you angry that it felt like love?" "It makes me sad," I said. "Because I think some of it was. I think my mother loves me in the way she's capable of. It's just a love that's never learned to give without taking something back. And I spent a long time mistaking the force of it for the fullness of it." He was quiet. I looked at the river. "My father, Keanu." "I don't think he thought of it as taking," I said. "I think he thought the whole system was just how things worked. He never saw me as a resource. He just never thought to look." "Is that better or worse?" I considered it. "Neither. Just different." We walked a little further. The river moved without hurry. A heron stood on a piling near the far bank, motionless, doing what herons do. You're going to have to decide what you want with them, he said. Not pushing, just naming it. I know. There's no right answer. I know that too. I watched the heron. I think I want something real, if there's something real to be had. I don't want estrangement for its own sake, but I can't go back to the version that was costing me my health. That sounds reasonable, he said. Dr. Coleman says I should take my time. Dr. Coleman sounds smart. She is. I looked at him sideways. You'd like her. Maybe someday, he said, with the lightness of someone making a careful offer, not a claim. I thought about someday, about all its unexplored rooms. Maybe, I said. 3 weeks after discharge, a letter arrived. I was at my kitchen table with coffee and a library book when I heard the mail slot. I wasn't expecting anything. I had moved most of my correspondence to email years ago, the way everyone had, the physical mailbox mostly a collector of catalogs and the occasional card. This was neither. A white envelope, business-sized, no return address. My name written by hand on the front, the handwriting I had known my entire life. Even, controlled, a little ornate at the capital letters. My mother. I held it for a moment, then I set it on the table next to my coffee and looked at it while I finished the chapter I'd been reading. I wanted to know I could do that, not ignore it, just finish the thing I was in the middle of before I let it change the room. When I opened it, I found 4 pages, handwritten on the stationery my mother had kept in the secretary desk in the living room for as long as I could remember, cream-colored with a small embossed border. She had always had beautiful handwriting. She had always known how to make things look considered. I read all 4 pages. She wrote about her marriage to Daniel, the early years, the things that had been good and the things that had fractured. She wrote about the decision to move to Portland, and in the way she wrote about it, I could see the shape of how she remembered it. Not as a removal, but as a rescue, a beginning, a choice she had made for both of us. She wrote about Keanu, about building something stable, about not wanting the past to have a door she kept having to close. She wrote, I know you think I kept things from you to control you. That is not how I understood it. I was trying to protect the life I had built for us. I was afraid that if Daniel came back in, everything I had made would become contested, would become an argument about before, and you would be caught in the middle of it the way children are. She wrote, I know the trust account was wrong. I know that. I want you to know I know that. She wrote, I also want you to know that every time I asked you for help, I believed you were able to give it. I never thought I was taking something you couldn't spare. That is not an excuse. I am trying to explain the distance between what I knew and what I should have known. And at the bottom of the last page, in writing that was slightly less controlled than the rest, slightly more human, slightly more like the version of her that existed before the management. I have missed you for the last several weeks in a way I did not anticipate. I thought I would be angry. I thought I would wait for you to come back. Instead, I have been sitting in the kitchen in the mornings thinking about when you were 8 years old and used to get up early on Saturdays to make what you called pancakes, which were really just flour and water and enthusiasm. I have been thinking about that version of you and this version of you and how I failed to protect the path between them. I am not asking you to forgive me on any timeline. I am asking you to know that I see it. I see what it cost. I read that last paragraph twice. Then I folded the letter and set it on the table and looked out my kitchen window at the November sky, which was the color of old silver, flat and diffuse. I thought about being 8 years old, about flour and water and enthusiasm, about the particular confidence of a child who has not yet learned that some people in the world will measure your effort against their need and call it even. I thought about my mother sitting in that kitchen, alone in the morning, thinking about the same child. And I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not for a long time, maybe in pieces, maybe never completely, but something that lived near compassion. The recognition that the person who had hurt me was also, in her own tangled way, hurting. That the architecture of what she had built, the control, the management, the careful deployment of love as leverage, had not made her happy either. It had just made her powerful, which is not the same thing, and she was only now beginning to understand the difference. I did not call her, not that day, but I got out a pen and a piece of paper. Ordinary paper, not stationery, just the notepad from the drawer by the sink. And I wrote, Mom, I received your letter. I need more time before I can say anything fully. But I want you to know I read it carefully and I heard what you said about the pancakes. I remember those mornings too. Selena. I put it in an envelope. I walked down to the corner mailbox in the mist and I dropped it in. On the way back up the stairs, I noticed that my hands were not shaking. 2 days after the letter, my phone rang and the screen showed Chris's name. I had not spoken to him since he'd stood at the foot of my hospital bed and said, "I'm sorry," Selena, with red-rimmed eyes and a carry-on bag over his shoulder. I had thought about calling him several times. I had not called him because I was still sorting through the layers of what I felt, and I didn't want to say something I didn't mean or withhold something I did. I answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said. "Hey." A pause. The comfortable and uncomfortable kind at once, the kind that exists between people who care about each other and are not sure of the current rules. "How are you feeling?" he said. "Better. Getting stronger." "Good," he exhaled. "That's good." Another pause. "I've been thinking about what to say for like 3 weeks." "What did you come up with?" "Not enough," he said. "But I'm calling anyway because Tara told me once that not saying the imperfect thing is worse than saying it badly." Tara's right about most things. "Yeah, I'm getting that." I could hear him gather himself, the particular breath of someone about to say something they've been carrying. I knew about the trust account. Not the details, not the full amount, but I knew it existed. Mom mentioned it when I was like 20, I think. She said there was some money from before that she'd handled and that it was complicated and I shouldn't bring it up with you. I was quiet. "I didn't ask what that meant," he said. He stopped. "I just accepted it because it was easier, because things being handled meant I didn't have to think about them. I did that my whole life, Selena. I let things be handled and I didn't ask who was doing the handling or what it cost." "Chris," I said. "I'm not finished," he said, with an echo of something I recognized from the hospital room, and it startled me. The echo of me and him. The same cadence. "I'm not going to tell you I'll pay it back because I don't think money is the point, but I want you to know that I see it now, the whole structure of it. I'm in therapy. I started 3 weeks ago, which Tara also suggested, and she was right about that too. And I'm trying to figure out who I am when no one's covering for me." A pause. "It's uncomfortable." "It should be," I said gently. "For a little while." "Yeah." "Chris?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you called." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was a half-degree less steady. "I miss you. I miss you the way you're supposed to miss someone, I think. Not the way I used to, not like missing a function, like missing a person." I looked at the window, at the silver gray sky of Portland in late November, the kind of sky that asks nothing of you. "I miss you too," I said. "Come visit. When you're ready, when I'm ready, we'll figure it out." "Okay," he said. And then, Daniel, is he good to you?" The question surprised me with how much weight it had in it, how much Chris was reaching for in asking it. "Yes," I said. "He is." "Good," Chris said quietly. "That's good." We stayed on the phone for a little while longer, talking about smaller things, easier things, his classes, my restrictions, whether either of us had watched the show Tara kept recommending. It was tentative and a little formal, and it was, underneath both of those, real. When I hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment, feeling the particular texture of something that is not fixed, but is no longer broken in the same way. The beginning of a different shape. I did not delete his contact. I moved it to the top of my favorites list. Small things. Evidence. The way doctor. Coleman said you learn the difference between being needed and being loved. Through accumulation, through noticing, through letting the small, true things add up. Owen Finley had an office in the Pearl District on the 4th floor of a building with a view of the Willamette on clear days. He was 41, methodical, with the habit of explaining things twice in 2 different ways to make sure you understood both the practical and the legal dimension of what you were deciding. I met with him for the first time the week after I came home. Daniel had suggested him, carefully, without pressure, the way he did most things, as someone who could explain my options without making the decisions for me. What Owen explained, over 2 sessions and several cups of coffee I was now allowed to drink again in reasonable quantities, was this. The trust account was legally mine. It had always been legally mine. The attempts to prevent me from accessing it, specifically the intercepted notifications, constituted, in Owen's assessment, actionable fraud. I could pursue it. He laid out what that would mean. Time, legal process, the particular emotional cost of litigation against a parent. I listened to all of it. I asked my questions. I took notes. Then I said, "What if I don't want to pursue the fraud claim?" "Then we don't," he said simply. "The account is accessible regardless. The fraud claim is separate. You don't have to do both." "Can I access the account without—" "Yes, the account is yours. Always was. We just need to complete the beneficiary verification process, which is straightforward." I looked at the river through his window, gray and wide and moving. "Then let's do that," I said. "Just the account. I'm not ready to decide about the rest." "That's completely reasonable," he said. "Owen," I said, "what would you do if it were your family?" He considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "I'd give myself a year before I decided anything permanent," he said. "A lot changes in a year. You change. They might change. And if they don't, you'll know it more completely than you do now." "And the money?" "Use it for yourself," he said. "That's what it was for." I won't tell you the number. It doesn't matter the way specific numbers can seem to matter. It isn't the point. It was never the point. And the moment I make it the point, it becomes the wrong story. What I will tell you is what I did with it, or the beginning of what I did. First, I paid off the remaining balance of my nursing school loans. I sat at my kitchen table on a December evening and made the transfer and watched the balance go to zero and felt something release in my chest that I hadn't known was still held. Second, I put 3 months of living expenses in a savings account I named in the app Simply Mine. It was the first emergency fund I had ever had that was actually for my emergencies. Third, I bought a plane ticket. Not Maui, not anywhere warm, not the compensatory vacation of someone treating a wound. I bought a ticket to see a college friend I had not visited in 4 years because I'd never had the time or the money to prioritize it. She lived in Asheville, North Carolina. She had a house with a porch and 2 dogs and a husband who made very good brisket and a standing offer that I kept declining. I called her and said I was coming in January. She was quiet for a moment, then, "Selena Cooper, it's about time." "I know," I said. "I know." I went back to work on a Monday in mid-December, 8 weeks after I had collapsed in that hallway. Dr. Park's conditions: no more than 3 consecutive overnight shifts, a mandatory day off between back-to-back long shifts, and a standing check-in with occupational health once a month for 6 months. I had agreed to all of it without negotiation, which Tara said was growth genuinely. The morning of my first shift back, I stood in the parking garage at 6:45 p.m. in the space that was not spot 14C. I had changed my parking level, a small, deliberate act, and I sat in my car for a few minutes with the engine off. Not stalling, just arriving. There is a difference. I thought about the last time I had been in this building, the ceiling of room 318, the monitor reading my own heart back to me, the empty chair. Then I got out of the car and went in. Brenda was at the nursing station. She looked up when I came through the unit doors. She did not make it a moment. She just nodded, precisely, with the quality of acknowledgement that contains everything it needs to and nothing it doesn't. "Room 2 needs a med check," she said. "On it," I said. Tara appeared from the break room with 2 cups of coffee, handed me one, and fell into step beside me without a word. We walked down the hallway together. The same hallway, the same fluorescent lights, the same particular quality of a hospital in the evening settling into its overnight self. The sounds were the same. The smell was the same. I was not the same. I thought about what Dr. Coleman had said in our last session. The goal isn't to stop caring for people. You're good at it and it matters. The goal is to stop confusing care for others with the debt you owe yourself. I checked the chart on room 2. I introduced myself to the patient, a woman in her 60s named Barbara, who had come in that afternoon with chest pain and was watching a cooking show on the small mounted television with the sound turned low. She looked at me when I came in with the particular evaluation of someone who has been in enough hospitals to know that the quality of the night nurse matters. "You're back," she said, which surprised me. "I'm sorry?" "My daughter had you last year," she said. "She talked about you, said you were the one who actually explained what was happening." I looked at her for a moment. "What's her name?" She told me. I did remember. A post-surgical patient, early 40s, frightened in the specific way of someone who has never been seriously ill before. I had sat with her for 20 minutes on a night shift explaining her cardiac monitor, the numbers and what they meant, the difference between what was alarming and what was simply her heart doing its complicated work. "How is she?" I asked. "Good," Barbara said. "Home, doing well." She looked at me with assessment still in her eyes, but something warmer underneath it now. "She said you were kind." "I tried to be," I said. "Well," she turned back to the cooking show. "Try again tonight. I could use it." I laughed. A real one, not the professional kind, not the reassuring kind, just a laugh. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I'll do that." The last Wednesday of the year, Daniel and I drove to Cannon Beach. It was his suggestion. He had been once, years ago, and remembered it as the kind of place that was better in winter than summer. Fewer people, the ocean more itself, the light more honest without the pressure of a season asking it to perform. We left Portland at 10 in the morning, the highway west through the Coast Range, the trees closing in on either side and then opening onto the wide flat of the river delta before the coast. An hour. We didn't talk much on the drive, which was no longer something I needed to fill. It was just the road and the radio low and the particular ease of being in a car with someone you don't have to explain yourself to. The beach at Cannon Beach in late December is exactly what you would expect, and more than you can quite prepare for. Haystack Rock stands out of the water close to shore, enormous and permanent, covered in dark mussels at the waterline and attended by a rotating congregation of birds that regard the whole human enterprise with the detachment of creatures operating at a different timescale. The sand is dark and flat and goes on in both directions farther than makes practical sense. The ocean is not the ocean of summer postcards. It is gray-green and loud and entirely committed to itself. We walked. The wind was cold in a clean way, the kind that doesn't apologize but doesn't seem hostile either. Just present. Just the actual temperature of December on the Oregon coast, which is the temperature of December on the Oregon coast and doesn't require your opinion on the matter. I had my hands in the pockets of my heaviest jacket. Daniel walked beside me with the steady, unhurried pace I had come to recognize as his natural speed. The pace of someone who has learned, late and at some cost, that moving quickly doesn't always mean getting anywhere. "How are you feeling?" he asked, not in the medical way anymore, in the way of someone who wants to know the actual answer. "Good," I said. "Strange, like I'm at the beginning of something I don't have a name for yet." "Is that okay?" I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said. "I think beginnings are allowed to not have names yet." He nodded. We walked further. Haystack Rock moved from ahead of us to beside us to behind us. The birds continued their indifferent business. "I keep thinking about something Dr. Coleman said," I told him. "About evidence, about how you learn the difference between being needed and being loved through accumulation. Through collecting small, true things until the weight of them changes what you believe." "What does that mean for you practically?" "It means I notice things now," I said. "I notice when someone is with me without wanting something from the being there. I notice when I'm in a conversation and there's no transaction underneath it." I paused. "I notice when someone gets up at 1 in the morning and drives to a hospital because they couldn't not." He was quiet beside me. "That's evidence," I said. "I'm learning to count it. The waves came in and went out, came in and went out. The rhythm's so old, it predates everything we've built to make ourselves feel less temporary." I stood at the edge of the water for a moment and let the cold edge of a wave run over the toes of my boots. "I'm still angry sometimes," I said. "I want you to know that. Not at you, not mostly. At the years, at the shape things took. Some mornings I wake up and I think about being 23 and I want to go back and say something to that version of me." "What would you say?" I thought about it. I'd say, "You don't have to earn this. You don't have to work until you break to prove you deserve to be here. The people who require that of you are not paying you a compliment. They are telling you something about themselves." He was very still beside me. I'd say, "There is a man in a city you've never thought to look for who sends money to an account in your name every year because he cannot find you, but he refuses to stop." I'd say, "That is what it looks like when someone doesn't stop." Daniel looked at the ocean for a long moment. When he turned to look at me, his eyes were bright in the way of someone who is holding something carefully. "You were 8 years old the last time I saw you," he said. "You had dropped your fork and you were laughing. I thought, if she can find that funny at 8 years old after everything that year had already been, she's going to be okay. Whatever happens, she's going to be okay." "It took a while," I said. "You got there, you mean?" he said. I looked at the ocean, at Haystack Rock, enormous and ancient and completely unmoved by the water perpetually working at its base. We have a lot of years to make up, I said. We do. I don't want to rush it. I don't want it to be a project. It won't be, he said. We can just... He paused, finding the right word. We can just be. See what grows. I can do that, I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out. Tara. You at the beach? Send picture of the rock. I'm stuck in the hospital cafeteria and need proof that good things exist. I took a photo. Haystack Rock, gray sky, the dark moving line of the water. I sent it with no caption. She sent back. There it is. Go live your life, please. I put the phone away and looked at the rock for another long moment. Then I turned away from the water and fell back into step beside Daniel, heading back down the beach toward the parking lot, toward the drive home, toward the year that was ending and the one beginning its approach just beyond the edge of visibility. The waves kept coming. The birds continued their business. The rock stood as it had always stood in exactly the place it was. I want to tell you something before I go. I spent a long time believing that the measure of a person was what they could carry. How much, how quietly, how long. I was good at it. I made it into a kind of identity. The capable one, the one who handled things, the one you called when something needed to not fall apart. What I know now, what 12 days in a hospital bed and 2 months of slow rebuilding have given me, is that carrying everything is not strength. It is a response to an environment that taught you carrying was the price of belonging. Real strength is learning to put some of it down. Real strength is changing your emergency contact. It is opening an envelope and sitting with what's inside until you understand the shape of it. It is answering the phone when someone calls to tell you a hard, true thing and not hanging up and then calling back when you're ready. It is, sometimes, letting someone sit outside a glass door because they don't know if they're allowed in yet, and then one day telling them, now you know. This story is not finished. That's the honest version. My mother and I are in the early stages of something I don't have a word for yet. Not reconciliation exactly, not estrangement, something in the middle that requires careful tending and no promises about what it becomes. Chris and I are building something new out of materials we didn't know we had. Daniel and I are taking Wednesdays one at a time, and they are good Wednesdays, more good than I would have believed possible 4 months ago. I went back to work. I am sleeping. My heart is beating evenly, monitored monthly, consistently unremarkable, which is the best possible thing a cardiologist can say about your heart, and I have learned to accept it as the gift it is. I have a savings account named mine. I am going to Asheville in January. I am 32 days away from 29, and for the first time in years, I am curious about what comes next. Thank you for staying, for listening all the way through, for not leaving when it got hard, for being here at the end of a story that needed someone to hear it. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've been the one carrying the weight while someone else got to leave, if you've ever confused being needed with being loved, I hope this gave you something, even just the small thing of knowing you're not alone in it. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me if there's a part that stayed with you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It means the next story finds you instead of you having to go looking for it. Take care of yourselves. And remember, the chair beside your bed is supposed to be warm. I'll see you next time.